it's not a great recession or a great resignation. I said it was the great retention. And then he even said, which I like better, which is it's the great migration. People are migrating from one gig to the next. And look, for the last 22 months, we've all realized that quality of life matters. And I'm not going to put up with shenanigans anymore.
Everything leads to growth with the National Association for Sales Professionals. The Leads to Growth podcast with the National Association for Sales Professionals provides in-depth discussions sharing the best sales, prospecting, influence, and communication skills, as well as sales training techniques to take your professional sales career to the next level.
Hello and welcome back to another Leads to Growth podcast. My name is Chris McCoy, and I'm your master trainer and host today, and very excited to have someone cross my path here recently in my inbox. You know, it's funny, you get so many emails these days, cold emails, random emails, solicitation emails, and one passes you and you didn't know where it came from, and you're like, ooh, I did find a good one in the batch of crap today. And that was an email that from a friend in our office that introduced me to Richard Harris. And Richard Harris, if you all don't know, is one heck of a follow. Guy's got some great stuff out there. If you're not on LinkedIn already following him, you should. But this guy was director of sales training for Sales Hacker back in the day. He runs Harris Consulting Group, Surf and Sales co-founder, which we're going to find out more about here very shortly as my man turns up his heater in Northern California. Richard, thank you so much for joining us, man. We appreciate you being here.
It is my pleasure. I'm excited to be here. How do I get to be a master trainer? I love that. Is there a course I need to take?
Yes, absolutely. At NASP, we have a certification for master trainers, but it's you got to be on the inside. I'll tell you a little bit more later on. But
sounds good.
All right. Hey, what's your shirt say over here? Let me catch this.
So it says earn the right. So when people ask me what I do, I tell them that I teach reps how to earn the right to ask questions, which questions to ask and when. And so when I talk to revenue leaders, just like you put your hands up, it's kind of like, oh, that's makes sense. And it took me a couple of years to actually figure that out, to come up with it, because I was just trying to figure out, I don't want to talk about what I do. Nobody cares what we do, right? They care about the pains we solve. And that's sort of the easiest way to describe it. So
I love that.
That's where it comes from.
And it's beautiful too. Earning the right is a great way than just getting the right? When you've earned it, you can find yourself back there again. You feel proud of it. There's some internal motivation and drive that carries you through onto that next piece as well. So
yes, indeed.
Absolutely love that. So, all right, first off, I got to start with surf and sales, because we were supposed to do this interview not too long ago. And Richard says, hey, I'm sorry, this is interviewing with the workshop training I'm doing. I'm like, what's it called? He's like, it's surf and sales. And where was it?
It's Costa Rica.
Yeah. So, hey, not bad. So tell me more about this, Richard.
Yeah, we've been doing it since 2017. We did, I guess 2018 was the first year. And, we came up with this idea because my buddy Scott Leese and I were in Costa Rica with our families for Thanksgiving. And Scott turned at me as we're walking off the beach one night and said, how come nobody does a conference here? Why do we always got to go to, someplace with 100,000 people or in the middle of nowhere at the Hampton Inn? And I said, I don't know, let's do it. So he started teasing the idea, and we put it together with our friend Jeff Coleman, who really helps run all the logistics. So big shout out to Jeff. And it's just grown. It's nuts. We take about 17 people go to Costa Rica. Everyone, we're in houses right on the beach. And we do about 4 or 5 hours of content every day. The rest of the time we're surfing. The surf lessons are included, or we're bonding. Like one of the things, my favorite part of the event is what I call the in-between moments, right? It's not the sessions are great. Everybody loves the sessions. The feedback is always fun, but it's that ability to take the conversation from a session, because you heard, Chris say, me being able to say, hey, Chris, let me ask you this question later. And you're in this beautiful, wonderful setting. And so that is really where it goes and grows. And in fact, it took on a new life this year. We while we were there in November this year, we decided to announce May. without checking with our wives, which was a whole other discussion. and we sold out May before we even left Costa Rica. And then we announced November for next year, and people are already putting down deposits. So it's sort of ramped up this year. So then we came up with a podcast to sort of help support it. Then we came up with what we call the bonfire sessions, which are really just webinars, which we do. We've done things with Manny Medina from Outreach. We're doing one today about AI and sales and how it's really going to help at the top and middle of the funnel starting now. All kinds of stuff. So that's the long story. Sorry if it got too long-winded for folks.
No, and I love that. And I'm going to come back to something too. You said something earlier that I thought was very interesting. But I love that you found somebody that you like to work with, and you found a place that you like to work, and how business just finds its way, right? When people often think that I've got to go struggle and try super hard and do things that I don't like and don't enjoy in order to find happiness. But there is another way. It isn't always as easy as just hanging out in Costa Rica and decide we're going to do business here, but it is finding someone that you like to spend time with, and finding a place you like to spend time to do it. Yeah. Go ahead.
And I agree with you on the grind stuff, right? Like, it's hard, but I also think too, the value of the grind is, the hard work, but then even if you fail, it pushes you in the direction to help you find what you do love. Right. So you kind of have to put some of that effort in. I can assure you the first time we did it, it was a grind. Like, we were like, oh my God, are we going to lose our shirts on this kind of thing based on the cost? So,
did you enjoy the grind though, Richard? That's the question.
It's a good question. For me, it was really tough. I'm a big fan of mental health in sales and talking about my own mental health and how I made my mental health a superpower. So I was doing a little bit of a struggle the first time we did it. So the grind had a heavier weight on me because I was just in one of my more depressive modes. I'm lucky, for those listening, that, for me, my depression I never hurt myself, wanted to hurt myself or hurt others. It was just a general sadness, but it hurts motivation. So for me, it was a really tough grind that time around. But still fun
and worth it. And I think that's probably the best way to say it, right? Like those things that are hard to do in the beginning are worth it in the end, usually. And I imagine having something to focus your mind on, a project to pull you away from that sadness also helped. I think I talk to a lot of people right now who are, you talk about the workforce shortage right now, no shows on the job. Like, people just I don't know what happened to them. They just stopped showing up. Like, people just don't. Yeah. And that never used to be the thing back in the day. Like, no, I'm holding on to this job. I can't let this seat get open because somebody might take it from me. And that just doesn't happen anymore. And I think people are very just content with there's a lack of purpose in a lot of people out there, which is creating this.
Well, I think their purpose is shifting, right?
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Companies, I think, it's, I was talking to someone the other day, it's not a great recession or a great resignation. I said it was the great retention. And then he even said, which I like better, which is it's the great migration. People are migrating from one gig to the next. And look, for the last 22 months, we've all realized that quality of life matters. And I'm not going to put up with shenanigans anymore. And the companies are slow to adopt, or they're trying to adopt, but they're not adopting fast enough. Like, I know a lot of companies are trying hard, but it's a growth mode for all of us. So, the companies finally realize, no, you're not, you're lucky that I show up, not I'm lucky to have a job.
Absolutely.
And in sales, I've had this belief for a super long time is sales, you're always a free agent. Like, I've never, it's up to the company to keep me, not for me to feel like I'm lucky to have a job. Like, screw that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say things like that on this.
Oh no, you're allowed to say whatever you want, Richard. This is a free room here. This is open. You said something earlier about set and setting, about just being able to be in that place and do something. With everybody working from home, this whole gig economy, we're social creatures. A lot of us salespeople. Humans in nature, right? We're connections, one of our basic human needs. How do you think that impacts salespeople? We talk about end of quarter, the reaction that I got to get the deals. How does that affect salespeople not being able to connect with people on a regular basis, but having to still do that?
It's a great question. it depends on the personality, right? So I've talked to a lot of people, the extroverts have a harder time with this. And I think that's an interesting challenge for them. And they've found other outlets because they're extroverts. They can't not do it, but it was a big adjustment for them. There's also a belief, and I don't know if there's a study around it, but there's a thought going around that, introverts are just as good salespeople as extroverts. Like, you don't have to be the high performing athlete. You have to be a self-motivated person. You have to not want to fail. Because not everybody who, hates losing is a great athlete, right? So they can be introverts. And so I think for those people, it was easier to adopt, to it. I think companies have done the best they can in terms of like trying to create social things. And I just, big adjustment for the kids to learn how to behave in a classroom again. It was almost like they forgot. I've got a sixth grader, and some of the kids in his classroom were a little disruptive, not in a bad way or physical, but they were just, disruptive. And it's, people forgot. So like, it's going to be a lot like, the best example I could come up with is, if you're a mother or father and you took 12 weeks of paternity when your child comes, easing back into this social environment is a struggle as a parent, right? You've got all the emotions around leaving your child, and you've got, oh, now I got to work all day, and then I got to have to, it's just a big adjustment. And I think that's the closest example I could come up with that's similar to this as we slowly go back to the office.
We really don't have a lot of references for this type of shift that's happening right now. And it's also interesting how this shift happens in the same time where we're having a big shift in the sales industry, right? This shift from automation and mass outreach to great marketing and AI and good inbound and strategic, identifying of clients. Everything is shifting very different. You talk to some salespeople now, and some of them have never even picked up a phone and dialed out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't actually talked to anybody about that one. Like, so what, I have talked to people who've hired, SDRs and trying to teach them about cold calling, but I haven't asked them what the challenges were in the remote world to teaching the cold calling piece. And what are those learnings? That's a good conversation.
We've had some great conversations with university professors. One from University of Northern Illinois University, and then UNC State, who we have some interns with. And these guys are actually teaching their students how to make phone calls and leave voice messages because they've never done it before. Yeah,
I know a couple of teachers as well. UT Dallas has a good sales program. As does University of Houston downtown. Like, I know a couple of their professors, and they are teaching them all this stuff. Like,
but they're getting back to the foundations of picking up the phone and making a phone call, and
totally
what it's like to leave a message, like the basics.
Yep.
And so to be, with this gap of talent or of, look, we used to motivate people by money. Now people realize, these kids don't care about that. They want to be a part of something special. They want onboarding. They want training. They want life development. They're no longer born with the skills of hustle and grind, which we were, which seemed to be bred in us when we came up. There's a very big gap.
Well, I disagree. Hold on. I disagree with that. I think they are capable of the hustle and grind. It's a different grind than what we know.
Okay.
Their hustle and grind is a side hustle. Theirs like, hey, what's my passion? Right. Which I think first started to show itself when, we started hiring the millennials. And by the way, if you're a millennial listening to this, it's not your fault. It's our fault in Gen X. Like, you guys are not the problem. We are. Yeah. But, it came with, well, what's the purpose of the company? What is your do-gooder part of the organization? Because that's a side hustle for the organization.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
In my mind, right?
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
And so I think they grew up that way. They grew up having to be scrappier in a different way than we did, because they probably experienced things differently and saw their parents experience things differently because of 2008 and 2009, right? And so they have learned to value the experience in the millennial generation. I was talking to it's Dr. Richard Dover at UT Dallas, and I asked him about a year ago, like, what's he seeing in Gen Z? And he says the Gen Z group is coming along to be a lot more coin operated like Gen X versus the millennial group, which is more experiential.
Okay.
In that thought. So anyway, I think there's a hustle there, but I think it's a different kind of hustle.
You're right.
The hustle is, you and I grew up where it was like, even though we were in sales, we'd work 10 or 12 hours a day because that's just what you did. They're going to work their 8 hours a day, and they're going to do their job, and then they're going to go do something else. And they're going to follow a passion, which is not what we were encouraged to do.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I like that too. And you're right too. They will hustle for something that aligns with their passion, with their mission, and with their vision, but they won't do it for the dollars and cents, which was a very easy coin operated motivation technique for us as we were growing up. You're right. It is. And it's also funny. I like how you gave them forgiveness. There's this whole saying of this idea that every generation has complained about the generation before them. Old man doesn't understand my music, and every generation's complained about the generation below them. Oh, they're lazy.
Right. It's the same problem.
It's been since the beginning of time. It was
the same thing for Elvis, right? Like, oh my God, he's going to corrupt the world.
It's funny, these cycles that we go through, and the one that we're in right now. So tell me about AI. You've been talking a lot about AI, and a lot of people. So a lot of the when I see technology, I see a lot of people go, okay, I love it. You see some people go after it and maybe a little too early. You see some people just waiting for it, but there's got to be a balance in it. And AI seems to be really starting to find its use cases in value and in ROI in a very good way right now.
Yeah, I think that we've been in the collection mode for the last few years around AI. Like, we need data before we can start doing predictions.
That makes sense.
And I think those who have the data can start making better predictions and encouraging in sales the right behaviors. The ones that stick out to me are Gong, Chorus, Reggie, who we're doing this event with, where they've analyzed all the data. And as like all new technology, right? Everyone's very skeptical early on. In fact, I did a very informal poll. Like, LinkedIn is not the, place to get, plus or minus 3% accuracy on your polling. But I asked the question of, do you believe we're there yet for AI in sales? And I want to say 67 or 77% said, no, we're not there. They don't trust it. I literally said, do you trust it? Like 17% said yes. And then like 4% said other. And I found it very, very interesting that I would have thought more people in sales, because that's who I'm connected with the most on LinkedIn. So would have been on board that we're there. So that was intriguing to me, which is what we'll talk about today in the event. So it's just one of those things we need to pay attention to, and it hasn't been talked about, I think, at the tactical level, which is why I think it's so important. For years, before this, it was, well, we have a fancy algorithm, and it's like, please, come on now, like, I don't care. We have an ROI calculator, and then it became an algorithm, and now it's become AI, and there's always this level of disbelief. So it's interesting. We're still early. We're still way early, but my question to the people who are naysayers are, well, are you going to be an early adopter and learn to fail fast? Or are you going to, go for it? So
be late to the party.
Or ignore it and wait.
Exactly. And, I think that maybe the vagueness in your question could have brought in the high, conversion. When you say, is AI ready for sales? I think some people think that is this an AI robot that's going to be selling me everything now? And then other people are like, well, yeah, but there's also this AI email writing assistants like Lavender, which are increasing reply rates in like by 30 or 40%. So
it doesn't. And that's what Reggie does. Like, Reggie goes a little further than that. Reggie, they write the cadence and the sequence, and they've got some new stuff around job descriptions and bias that they can run. I see that already in HR. Like, hey, they're running those things. Theoretically, they're using AI to read resumes. So it's kind of been around. and we just haven't paid attention.
I think so.
Oftentimes in sales, we're slow. We're the lagging adopter of tech. Marketing's way ahead of us, right? Marketing's doing A/B testing on all kinds of stuff, right? So they can do better predictions. So it's interesting. It'll be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. And you said it very, it's almost like saying, is sales ready for automation? Well, yeah, some automation, not some of this gibberish that people send me in my LinkedIn inbox and in my email,
right.
not some of it's ridiculous, but automation built with the human content and personalization.
Look, I've used automation on LinkedIn, and I can perfume it enough that someone probably doesn't realize it's automation in some cases. But people have just gotten smarter.
Yeah, well, it's. I think people think that AI is just going to take over, automation is just going to take over, but I think that human element, we're still in that area where human element is still significantly important. One of the great things that Lavender does, I'm sure Reggie does something similar, is it measures the time that a person spends on an email. So when an account manager is looking at his SDRs and saying, okay, well, it looks like you spent 3 seconds on every one of these emails, which means you obviously didn't take any time to personalize this. You copy and pasted a template,
right?
And you're seeing that a lot nowadays because that whole SDR role. Do you think it's dying? Is that role going away, or just some areas?
Yeah, I think it's dying for certain industries, verticals, and price points. I was very skeptical, and I've been convinced over the last year that full cycle sales reps actually perform better. I'd love to see some data around it, but I do believe there needs to be a little bit more of that, where the reps, the AEs are taking more full cycleness, and there's more of a partnership with the SDR, not waiting on the SDR. I think the role will play itself out in certain verticals and industries and won't work. Obviously, it won't work in a transactional environment. I think as we've adopted as the customer in the last 22 months has adopted and adapted to virtual selling on Zoom, they'll be more comfortable doing it, so they don't need the SDR as much. It becomes one more Zoom meeting. So I think that's a challenge we're running into, and it's just like everything else. Like I remember, I'm old enough to remember when, I'm old enough to remember Y2K. For the millennials who don't know, we all thought the computers were going to blow up on December 31st, 1999, because the computers only had 2-year digits. We had no idea what was going to happen. And, a lot of work went into it, but it didn't cause any major outages. But I also remember that was around the same time where they were talking about the first time people were going to shop online for Christmas. And I remember they were like, people just aren't comfortable putting their credit card number in, right? Like now it's in your phone and you pay with it, right? And so I think it's the same thing with all this. There's just this slow comfort level of adoption.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, and these trends are moving so fast. You have to be. I mean, it's really tough to adopt and integrate. I also heard the idea with a lot. I mean, some of these softwares tools are so vast and so integrated that there's so much depth to them. I heard the average software is only being used up to 50% of its full depth and scope.
I think what's going to happen. That is a piece of it, but I also think what's going to happen with the AE and the SDRs, it's a different kind of AE and SDR. Right. Like you've got to have more technological sound, right? Like I ran sales teams where, the people I hired, it's great. If you can ever hire a teacher, by the way, for sales, like it's the best person to hire, because guess what they do? They teach all day long. Right. And they get complex ideas across to people who don't understand. So, but I would hire a lot of sales teachers, and some of them didn't know how to type. They were still hunting and pecking on the keyboard, right? Well, I don't know that I could hire someone like that today in 2021. It'd be a tough sell. But so the AE and the SDR, everybody's going to have a stronger understanding of how the tech works and how things integrate in Vidyard and LinkedIn and Reggie and Lavender and Salesforce and Pipedrive and SalesLoft or Outreach. Like you got to have some tech chops to you that didn't exist. I'm already at the place of over communication between Slack, text, and email and phone. Like, I'm old school. I'm like, you want to get in hold of me? I'm an inbox zero guy. Email me. right? Having me pay attention to 4 channels on Slack is a fucking pain in my ass. So, but I'm old. Like, I get it. I know where I sit in the hierarchy. So, but it's going to take a different animal, I think.
You gave a little tip to all of our sales leaders out there. You don't have to hire somebody with a resume that matches the resume you're looking for. You can reach outside of your circles. Teachers are great. I also heard a great thing from Christine Rogers at Aspireship that restaurant industry, waiters and wait staff.
Them people all the time. Like, I would recruit because they're always on the upsell. Do you want, like, you know, and they're looking to get out of that industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, you know, Scott, as my buddy Scott says, you know, sales is often, you know, the dumpster of all other careers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people just, because there's no skill to it. There's roughly, you might know better, 300-ish universities that have a degree in sales. Like, maybe.
I heard less than that before, but yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, there's about 3,500 or 3,700 universities in the United States. So that's less than 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't go into life. You know, I was one of the few who wanted to go into business and sales. So, but most of my friends didn't. You know, and so it's an interesting place that you really should be looking outside your norm, right?
Absolutely. We actually teach one of our certification programs at the University of South Carolina School of Marketing and Business, because I think they said almost 35% of marketing students end up in sales or something higher like that. But,
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It's a very high rate because there's the marketing jobs that they believe are out there just don't exist or whatever. And so they end up falling into that sales role. But yeah, I love the idea that it's the motivation. You heard this come up a couple times today on the call. You know, the grind, the motivation, the hustle, right? What that means is these are all fancy words for internally motivated. That means when the shit hits the fan outside, I still grind, I still hustle. Yep. When it's nice outside, I still grind, I still hustle. When it's raining outside, Richard still grinds, he still hustles. That's how people make it there. And when you can't, sometimes it's a very difficult thing to teach.
Yeah, you can't teach urgency. You either have it or you don't. So there's a reason I'm not an accountant. Right? Like, there is. Like, there's mindsets to that. There's a reason I'm not a logistics person. There's a reason I'm not an operations person. There's a reason, you know, why I like the fluidity of sales. You know, and I've tried operations. I tried to be a head of operations and I hated it. I hate doing accounting. I hate tracking numbers. I mean, you know, I set up the minimal amount to track in my Salesforce, so I can at least feel like I know what I'm doing. And I could tell you, I probably look at my dashboard once a month. You know, it's like, oh, who haven't I called on? You know, I use reminders and I've got all that stuff built in, but I'm like, oh yeah, that deal. What happened to that one? So, you know,
yeah, absolutely. So, you find somebody with some internal motivation, right? And then more than likely that person's not going to have the tech savvy skills. So you teach them the tech savvy. Now that part is growing more and more and more now, connecting these things, APIs and all these different things that you're needing to learn now. Justin Michael has that great book, Tech Savvy. I don't have it written because I let my IT guy borrow it so he could maybe translate the other half of it to me that I didn't understand, because I got through most of it.
It's a good one.
And I consider myself pretty knowledgeable in that area, but he really put me on another level and saying, look, there are so many ways to do this. Yep. And I think that's what really opened up to my eyes. It's like, there are a million ways to sell. There are a million processes, a million tools. How do you know, Richard, like when you're consulting somebody, where do you get started with them as far as what tech stack, what system to use as far as SDR, AEs? Do you go right to the business model? Do you go, are you looking at where they're at? Are you fixing a lot of people, or are you starting up a lot of people?
I say I'm auditing a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah, because, most of the time, they're on some level of CRM, HubSpot, or Salesforce tends to be main. Then it depends on where they are in the sales cycle and how big they are with sales teams, right? Okay. So to some extent, until you have enough conversations at an early stage, the tech stack's not going to be the best piece for you to some extent. Until you get to a couple of reps. If I'm working with a founder, I might get them some automation on LinkedIn so they can try and set some more meetings. I'd rather them learn that than learn, outreach or sales loft at this stage.
Sure.
They also don't have their messaging down. So now if you're asking, okay, once they have a team, they got a team of 6 or 8. Okay, now where do you start to do the stack? I think an engagement platform is critical, whether it's sales loft or outreach. I know the founders, so I always try to be a little agnostic. I have certain things I like about one and certain things I like about the other, but it's kind of up to that, to the companies to prove it. Right. So that's one thing. I'm a big fan of Vidyard and video, because I think that's still a differentiator in places. Big fan of the Reggies and the Lavenders. Any of these things that can help you get smarter and better faster. Gong obviously is a big one. So I think that's those are the most important ones. I'd probably, depends on where they are, but if I had to choose, let's say, okay, I was choosing 2, it'd either be a sales loft or an outreach, be that engagement platform, and then it'd be conversation intelligence. And I know outreach and sales loft have some function of that. It's just a question of what do you need now? And, this is where it gets complex. How many platforms can your reps handle at this stage of the game, right? It's a little challenging. So that's where I typically start people. Zoom Info, obviously, if you need data, that's really critical. They're still the best data provider that I can see. I do like Seamless for data as well. I like Lead 411 for data, but those are the pieces. So if I had to, I'm going to contradict myself. I would, before the first tool I would make sure anybody gets is good data. Because without good data, none of that stuff works.
Absolutely. So
I'll contradict myself, say data comes first, then sort of comes the dialers, right? Then comes the engagement platforms and Gong, and then comes the video component, I believe.
I love it. Yeah, no, and these are all pieces, and it's about timing that you bring them in. It's about KPIs and understanding your systems, and about understanding how to link all these pieces and transfer all the data together. That's another big piece. Right now, you've got all these tools. How do we relay all the data together and really allow these pieces to communicate together? Yep. So, this is why I think, people wonder what sales enablement is. There's all this technology. You need somebody to help keep these pieces moving. I mean, especially if you want to start doing some good automation, you want to do those in small lists. You don't want 1,000 people lists. So just running, you want to micro focus and micro shift. So with all these shifts happening right now and all this knowledge base and even the potential of sales reps and account execs handling, more positions or more roles in the customer's experience. How are you seeing compensation shift? Especially we also talk about the younger generation. They're no longer motivated or chasing that $200,000 commission structure on top of their base that you told them that they might be able to earn.
It's shifting a little bit. I know where you're going with this, so I'll take it there.
Man, thank you, sir.
Yeah,
in case y'all don't know, there's not a question I could ask, not a conversation I could start that he hasn't already beat me to and where I'm going. So that's why this happens. Thanks, Rich.
No, there were a couple of them.
All right, good, my man. All right, I'm proud of myself.
So I've started this dialogue with my buddy Scott around everything that's happening in the job market and in sales, right? Let's say you're a 50-50 rep, 200 base, 200 OTE, right? Well, if I came along and offered you 300 base, but there's no additional upside, would you take it? And I think from the last 22 months, there would be some high quality people who would take that role. People are freaked out about this. I post on LinkedIn. It's probably, it's a crazy fun post. Tons of comments, people disagreeing, which I love, because it would also be hard for someone to recruit against that person. If I hire Chris and I'm paying Chris $300,000 and Chris is happy with that, Chris is motivated because he's a motivated guy. He's closing because he wants to close. Chris doesn't want to lose this job. If Chris doesn't perform, he still can lose the job. That's sales, right?
Mhm.
And technically, I can focus on leading indicators versus lagging indicators more. I could then say, great, we know the backwards numbers. If this is the goal you still have to hit, it's going to take this many meetings and this many phone calls and this many emails and this many demos and this many whatevers, right? Like I've got the conversion rate. So if I can see in 6 weeks that Chris isn't hitting the conversion rate, okay, right now, Chris and I can have a conversation. And by the way, you should be doing that with anybody at a 200 anyway. If in 6 weeks they aren't hitting the conversion rate, you're already having that conversation.
Absolutely.
So now some other company comes along and they're like, hey, Chris, you know what? I know you're making 300 base. We've got this thing that's 200 base and 250 commission, right? We're going to pay you more. Is Chris going to leave? It's going to be hard. If Chris is smart, Chris took some of that extra money that he's making in his base and he's putting it in investments and making compounding interest over the next 10 years, which is going to way outgrow the OTE. And there's no guarantee of the OTE. So, you then have to sort of be able to say to someone, great, how many of your reps are hitting OTE? If 70% are not hitting OTE, I would leave. I wouldn't take the job. That means the goals are way too high. So that's my opinion on it. I don't see a lot of people doing this yet. It's an interesting thought. I've heard from a couple of people that, oh yeah, my company does it. I've heard from some other companies where they've adjusted the base. Someone just commented today that, oh, the base is now 70% and your OTE is 30%, which is the same thing. Like, that's just what I'm saying, but it's just different. But I think it's good. It'll work in some places. It won't work in others. Right. But we'll see what happens. So that is, you have to try something different, particularly in this job market. I don't see the job market getting better at least until 2023, if not 2024. I just don't see, and it might get worse, just to, again, as we've been talking about the great retirement from the boomers. I just don't know. And particularly in sales, like there's not enough salespeople in the pipeline. I talked to, maybe you know this, Chris, if you talk to your friends who have sales degrees at colleges, my friends over at Texas and Houston, their reps are getting recruited their junior year because those kids they're learning everything. They're learning Sandler and Challenger and CR. They're learning all this stuff and they're role playing and they're coming out and they're getting recruited so fast. There's not enough in the pipeline. So
I think we've had one of our students from University of South Carolina not get recruited directly out of school, and that person ended up going into something else outside of sales. I think it was, and this is out of like somewhere around 80 students over the last 2 years. Yeah, so it's cool. Very significant. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that it will shift more. I mean, you said it yourself, and we have to try things. It's a different generation. They think different. They respond to different things. And look at the people out there. You see it all the time. I just had Mark Allen Roberts on, and we talked about voice of the customer. And they did this whole thing about where they had they just gave this big bonus for half of their employees. And then they did this big survey to their employees as well. And their surveys came back and said the least thing that they're motivated by was money. Out of the four things that they asked them, the fourth one was money. And they're like, but we just gave them this giant bonus. Yeah. And it did nothing. Didn't motivate them.
I remember hearing about that. Right. So, but it was also, now, if I remember that story, and you have to correct me, please, somebody can correct me.
Yeah. Somebody correct us here.
It also wasn't a performance bonus. It was just handed to them.
It was a handout bonus, 100%.
So that's a different factor.
Yes. Okay. Sure it is. Yes.
To some degree. Right. So,
but I think they were trying to earn some gratitude. They were trying to earn some rapport or some loyalty. That's loyalty is probably proper word there. Yeah. By that, and then they realized that was the least thing of that they valued, and it was basically just a waste of money for themselves. Yep. And you say when these people leave, everybody's all upset, but the problem is when the worst part is that when they left, they probably spent about 8 weeks, 12 weeks with you, where they already were checked out and just hadn't left the company yet, hadn't quit yet. So
they were interviewing. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Richard, man, this has been a lot of fun. Tell me about what else you got coming up here. We're going to put this thing out here. We'll get you out next week, Richard, so you can talk about anything you got coming up. Yeah.
What else is going on? Surfandsales.com is for the event. Surf and Sales podcast, if you want to go listen to a bunch of fun stuff.
And Scott's a great follow as well, yo.
If you don't follow my buddy Scott, please follow him.
Yeah.
My online content's over at John Barrows, so at jbarrows.com. So if you're looking for sales training there, you get my content plus all his, and Morgan Ingram and all these great people who, I assume these folks have been on your show. If not, you need to get them on.
Man, let's make those introductions, man. Let's make it happen.
And I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I've got some stuff I'm holding back because I got to work on it.
Make sure you get on the follow, yo. I told you, the guy's a great follow. Look,
thank you.
Absolutely. And look, and I'd say if you can take one thing away from every situation, every opportunity, every day, just there's the great book, right? One thing. And if you take one thing away from this conversation, have a little hustle, have a little grind, let that thing show that you can't teach that anywhere. And if you're a sales leader out there, find questions that identify that. Don't look at the resume as much as you look at that internal motivation. I think you can
totally agree.
Right?
100% agree. Thank you.
Man. Absolutely. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time, man. Really appreciate you, brother.
Likewise, man. Thank you, Chris.
Absolutely. Cheers. All right, y'all know where to find us. Like, comment, and share, do the stars, do the whole thing. And we'll see you on the next Leads to Growth. And hey, we're holiday season, so enjoy your holidays. Thank you so much for the follows and the love. Cheers, y'all.